Hi, Jessie. Thanks for joining me for Lead Time Chats.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me, Jane.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about the Chief of Staff role. And Jessie, I know you spent almost 5 years at Quora as a software engineer and engineering manager, and you're now Chief of Staff to the CTO at Roblox. And I'm super excited to chat with you because I personally just don't know many people in this role. And I imagine most other engineers also don't know many people in this role compared to, the other kind of like engineering journey roles, like tech lead, architect, engineering manager, director. Like there's just a lot more people in those roles. Maybe to start us off, you could just share a little bit about like what attracted you to a chief of staff role.
Yeah, totally. So at Quora, I had always been, I found myself getting involved pretty often in various kind of company benefit type of programs. So I ran our internal hackathons. I set up an apprenticeship program for our hiring. And overall, like I just found it really interesting and fun to be able to work on kind of these broader company types of projects. And so when I first started interviewing for Roblox, it's funny, I started as an interviewing for an engineering manager role, and the CTO had been looking for a chief of staff and kind of spotted my profile and thought it might be interesting for us to start talking.
Was he just like dipping into the other like the other roles? You're like, this person looks interesting.
Yeah, right. Like, see what's around, like snipe them up. Yeah. And so we just started talking about it. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but it sounded interesting enough to be able to, get to work closely with the CTO, who's, really great, and see what was going on in this larger organization. Because I think on top of that, right, when I joined, Roblox had maybe 600 or 700 engineers, which is a pretty large organization compared to Quora with about 100, 150 engineers.
Yeah, you mentioned like that you were always drawn to doing these like processes and team things at Quora, and I imagine that means like that's a big part of your role as chief of staff, but it's actually like your job rather than like something extra you're doing as an engineer. I guess not knowing much about chief of staff roles, like what does it look like? How do you think about the role, or how was it even pitched to you when you were applying for an engineering manager, but then got pulled into this other role?
Yeah, totally. So the pitch me at the time was, hey, you can work closely with the CTO, get to see a lot of, cool things, or get access to, maybe conversations or see or projects even that you might not otherwise. But, not really sure what's going to happen. Please join and then we'll figure it out.
That's quite a leap of faith.
It is a big leap of faith. I think what helped me a lot was knowing, my CTO had chiefs of staff before, not at Roblox, but at other companies. And so he had seen different chief of staff roles, right? Because every role ends up being pretty different. And so I guess it was more of, me trusting him and, wanting to work together with him and kind of trusting, hey, we'll figure out how this goes. So yeah, there are definitely a lot of different, I've seen a lot of different maybe chief of staff profiles are out there. I think for me, my role has, I think because I'm maybe more naturally interested in process, I've kind of gravitated towards a lot of process things here. But I think if I had been, really interested in maybe the technical side or even the business side, or I think that might have completely changed the projects that I worked on here.
Interesting. Yeah, I had seen I don't know, I think because I knew I was going to talk to you, I saw this like chief of staff to the CTO role. and I looked at the requirements, and it was just kind of this like, oh, you should have, 10 plus years experience working or it's like experience working on an engineering team, like as a software engineer, or like management consulting experience, or, like, it was just kind of like, or a lot of ors strung together. And it was kind of a funny thing to imagine. It's just like, it just seems like whatever person is in that role will like kind of define the role and fill in the gaps. And then maybe some other gaps will be filled in by some other person.
Yeah, totally. I think that's kind of how it's ended up for me. In some ways, it's if something is solely my responsibility with no kind of potential and end in sight or future kind of organization or team to transfer it to, I think that is potentially actually bad, because it means I don't have bandwidth to take on other kinds of urgent or maybe more immediate things that come up over time, right? So I don't think I'm a good permanent home for things. I think I'm a good, hey, we need someone to figure this out. Like here's this problem that's going on. We need someone to figure out what to do next, maybe drive initial steps of it, but then eventually like get it to a good place such that others can take it on. But again, I think that's also my role. And maybe one key thing is that my role is rotational. So when we first started talking about, from the very beginning, it was expected that I would stay here for a year and a half to 2 years, and then probably move to something else within the organization afterwards. This is kind of a training program, in some ways, like a training program for me and for the CTO to mentor someone within the organization.
Is that typical for most chief of staff roles?
It depends. There are some, like LinkedIn is an example of, they're an example. They talk a lot about their chiefs of staff roles. They also really emphasize it being rotational. I think I think in kind of this setup, part of the goal is to maybe it is to have it be that kind of mentorship to help grow this person into maybe a future, engineering leader, or, basically take on the role of the CTO in many years from now. And that's there are also chief of staff roles that are maybe intended to be more permanent. And I think often then you might see people who really are really passionate about the maybe program management part of it. So, and so they might operate more as NJOPs or TPM in that role.
Got it. That makes sense. It's pretty cool because then you get people, like, you kind of get that mentorship, you get someone kind of popped up to that higher level and able to see the org and also build relationships in the org, and then like put them back in and find somewhere good for them to work and bring all those skills.
Yeah, totally. I think it's a win for the organization and the CTO. I think it's also a win for the chief of staff, as they have this experience. So
you mentioned the like processes and team stuff being similar to what you had done at Quora, or kind of related. Are there other things you do in your role that are similar or very not similar to past roles?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when I think about the work that I do, I think it falls into maybe into a few major buckets. I think the first is strategic work. A lot of this past year we've redone a lot of our kind of team building processes. So we revamped hiring, onboarding, perf management, and so my this strategic bucket is kind of me helping figure out what is the direction, and of course shepherding the revamp of these things. I think a second bucket is maybe just operational work. So running staff meetings, prepping a big presentation. I stepped into basically TPM, our company-wide engineering efficiency effort, for a while, because we the CTO was responsible for it and needed someone to do that. And so in some ways that's, both of those first buckets are similar to what I've done before. I think the strategic one is maybe on a bigger scale. But the operational work is not that different from just being an EM. I think the other kinds of things I would say I do are maybe third is basically representing the CTO and his views and what he wants to make happen. It's actually kind of touchy at first because I'm not sure if, right, there are my views and then the CTO's views. And when, if someone is asking for an opinion, I don't know, I feel like to be pretty careful on this is what the CTO thinks versus this is what I personally think. And kind of clarifying on that. But, I'll sit in on meetings for him sometimes or basically kind of represent when he's not immediately there. And then
interesting. That sounds pretty, that doesn't sound like something I'm used to in like kind of tech lead, engineering manager, and that like being responsible for representing someone else's opinions, I guess.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this is one of the harder things for me because I guess I'm like deathly scared of giving off the wrong or like we're not giving off the wrong impression, but people making decisions because they think the CTO like said this thing and it sounds scary. But yeah, I think it took some time for he and I to get to know each other too, and for me to really understand how he thinks about a lot of things.
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of like conversations about like different topics then until you get to the point where you feel comfortable being like, I think this is what he would think about this new topic, right? So it's like machine learning and like training an algorithm of like
totally. I'm for and honestly for some of these things or maybe even a lot of these things I have no idea how he thinks about training an algorithm in this case. Like you should probably talk to him. So yeah, there's that. And then I might say like the last kind of bucket of work is just sort of being a jack of all trades, like kind of immediate problem solving. And I don't know, he might toss a question or problem at me like, hey, are on-call shifts a burden at the company? I want to start on this. And I think I would then figure out, okay, well, should we survey all, what now is it like, it's not like 1,000+ engineers. Do we survey all of them to ask? Do I try to ping some key people? How do I weigh the input of the most vocal people versus not? Are there metrics we can look at? Like I might then go figure out like, what do we do to figure out if on-call shifts are a burden? It might be as simple as asking a person, or it might be, running a survey or whatever it is, and bring that back. And so that might not take, that's not like a huge thing, but I think there are a lot of these things that kind of pop up that where I can kind of take burden off of him by, taking this maybe smaller problem and then running with it and bringing the results back.
Yeah. I mean, those sorts of things sound like there's a lot of, like at each point, there's a lot of judgment calls to make, right? Like even this question of like, is on-call a burden? Like he's not saying, hey, here's a survey, have these 3 questions, like from 0 to 5, like how much do you feel, right? He's not giving you that detail. And so you have to figure out like, okay, is it worth 1,000 engineers 5 minutes, right? That's costly too. Exactly. Once you're thinking about 1,000 engineers, right? Like how much effort should you spend, and how much effort or how much time should you invest of like other engineers' time to answer this question? So it's like, it seems like a simple question, but there's like so many, it sounds like there's so many steps and like decisions to make at each point.
Yeah, totally. And I'll be honest, I like second guess myself so much for the first, I mean, I still second guess myself a lot, but that's one of the things I struggle with too, is like, there is so, I'm a perfectionist, I'm type A. I like things being, I like figuring out the optimal solution and then making it happen. And I think I've had to learn or figure out, it's better to just do something than try to pursue the perfect solution.
Mm-hmm. What's been like the most unexpected part of the role, either specific work that you've had to do or just the role in general?
Yeah. To be honest, I think I was surprised at how I think I was surprised at how much maybe like people navigation I ended up doing. And I see that mainly because I think I didn't think about it. Like I think I was more used to, being in an EM or tech lead and kind of having a pretty clear domain that where was my responsibility. And I was I was clearly the decision maker for things within this scope. I think now I am stepping into a lot of, onboarding. I don't own that. I shouldn't own that. It's, our HR department that actually owns that. And so I think learning and figuring out how to navigate that, how to really like work closely with them, but also be taking an input from a couple hundred engineering managers and 1,000 engineers and figure out how to, get there and get input, consolidate that into something, and then also partner with these other functions really. Is, I guess, influence without authority is.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a tech lead for like the executive team.
Yeah, like on some of these projects. Yeah, totally. So yeah, I guess I just didn't expect that. I think I hadn't really honed that muscle, right? I'd worked with recruiting orgs before. I had worked with, all of the functions at Quora, but I didn't, I think I was coming in either as their customer or, maybe a lower level partner than, hey, I'm representing the engineering organization in asking you to do this.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a bit tricky to navigate at times. One thing you mentioned earlier on was like you just didn't know what to expect, because I think, and even just looking at the role descriptions for a chief of staff is kind of like some things are like must-haves, and then some things are just like, it sounds like it's more like choose your own adventure. I think that's pretty different from most other roles where like there's a more standard like leveling and like bullet point list of what's expected in like a staff eng, senior engineer, like tech lead, and tech lead's a bit ambiguous as well. But I'm curious, like, how do you see this role fitting into your career and your like journey as like an engineering leader? Like, what's next?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was so I was debating a lot about this. I think it's helped me learn a few things actually. I think a couple of as I was trying to think about what I wanted to do next, I was just thinking about what I've really enjoyed about this role and what it's brought for me. I think a couple of takeaways that I've learned about myself. I think one is, one is that I think this role helped me see that I enjoy the problem solving piece, like getting to dig into a problem and kind of, in some ways, like do whatever it takes, like take whatever problem exists or whatever problem is highest priority and being able to like tackle it and make it happen, and not worry about swim lanes, not worry about is this thing in my scope or not. And so I think that is maybe a key thing that's been really important to me. I think the second is that having a team feels really important to me. And I say that because I think in some ways it's not like I have a team of chiefs of staff around me. I think I work closely with the CTO and the VPs of engineering here. And I think it's just a little different than, say, being a software engineer and having, many other people in the same role on the team, or even being an EM and having many other EMs that you're working with on a day-to-day basis. And so I think eventually I would love to be leading an engineering organization that doesn't necessarily have to be CTO or VP Eng or whatever it is, but I think I enjoy facilitating and coordinating people to make things happen and have that flexibility to tackle whatever problems come up next. So after this rotation, planning to move into an EM role here at Roblox, and then I think we'll kind of see after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine this experience of just seeing things at this level. I mean, I imagine like it gives you a very unique experience that most people moving into a CTO or VP role don't have. I mean, I certainly didn't. Like half the stuff I do, I'm just like, I don't know. I'm just take my best guess and like hope it's good enough. And I'm not a perfectionist, so that's a little bit more comfortable for me. But I'm sure wherever you end up will really benefit from that experience. But yeah, thank you so much. I think this is thanks for I guess shining a light on one of the I think less explored and less talked about roles in engineering leadership. I think it'll be really useful to a lot of people.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me, Jean.